Following on from my video of drivers not leaving the cyclist enough space, here is another very dangerous example of several drivers not leaving the cyclist enough space. So just as a reminder, this is 1.5 meters in speeds of up to 30 miles an hour, and above that should be more than 1.5 meters. Now, there's been lots of discussion in the comments to my last video or two. First of all, being unhappy that those public comments were discussed in a video, but they were public comments after all. And secondly, that these bits of the highway code are guidance rather than must-not rules. However, even in parts of the highway code that don't say you must or must not do something, and even in those parts that say it's guidance, I can assure you that if you end up in some kind of collision and you end up in court trying to justify your actions, if you have contravened something that is within the highway code, the barrister on the other side is going to look to the rules, even if they are just guidance and even if they just say you should or should not do this or that, and use that against you. And I can assure you that the court is also going to use that against you. Because, for example, in the highway code, very often it will say, do not move over to the left in order to overtake. Now, lots of people say that it doesn't say you must not, therefore it's allowed. Well, it might be allowed in some situations, but what I can assure you, as I said, if you end up in some kind of collision and it turns out that you moved to the left to overtake a vehicle that's in front of you, and in doing so caused a collision, the barrister on the other side and the court is going to hold this against you because you've broken the rules of the highway code, even if they are just guidance and even if it doesn't say you must not do such a thing. Turning now back to the space that you should be leaving a cyclist, which is at least 1.5 meters. In this clip that I'm about to show you, it's certainly much less than 1.5 meters. And if this cyclist was injured by any of these vehicles, again, I can assure you that the court is going to hold this against those drivers. Because in most of these examples, it's barely half a meter. Take a look at this. This is obviously the rear view with the cyclist in the middle of the road, although he moves over to the side to allow this vehicle to pass. Not quite enough space, but not too bad. This van, on the other hand, you can see here just how close this van is as he comes past. As I said, in my estimation, probably no more than half a meter away from the cyclist, which on anybody's assessment is certainly unsafe, and precisely what these rules are designed to prevent. Next, you'll see that the cyclist had to move into the bus lane because of what happened with the van. Then this vehicle also doesn't really leave much more than a meter or so, but given that the cyclist was in the bus lane, this was also still too close. Next, you'll see that the cyclist does come back into the road, although stays over to the side. The Tesla is a little bit more cautious, but still doesn't leave much more than a meter between it and the cyclist, and again is still too close. Next, the road opens up a little bit, so I'm fast forwarding on this section, but what happens next is really quite interesting. You'll see in this portion of the clip there's an ambulance coming in the far distance. This dark vehicle decides to pull up onto the pavement, which is technically illegal, but I think, in my personal opinion, is perfectly reasonable. Same goes for the cyclist. The cyclist comes up onto the pavement as well. Neither road user should technically, legally be going onto the pavement. However, to allow the ambulance to pass seems to be fairly reasonable as there was no one on it. However, going back a stage to replay this little section, you'll see that once the cyclist comes back onto the road, this vehicle once again passes far too closely. As for the white car following behind, does exactly the same thing and passes far too closely. Albeit, you will say that the white car cannot go into the opposite lane because it's occupied, but legally speaking, that white car should have hung back until there was a clear space to overtake the cyclist. Now, I know lots of people don't support these rules and don't agree with these rules, but I am simply here to tell you what these rules are, and in my view, whether these vehicles are breaking those rules. So in closing comments, please do bear in mind that if you put comments in public against my videos, I am going to pick some of them out and discuss them because I maintain the view that these are up for discussion and some of these views are part of the problem because they represent how people treat the rules, how people just disregard the rules, and it's when drivers disregard those rules, like the videos seen in this clip and many others, that is when these collisions occur. Perhaps not for someone that's been driving for 30 years or so and have never had a problem until they do. because many of these drivers that end up killing somebody have never had a problem until they hit somebody and kill them. So they might have had a very clean driving record and never had any collisions for a long period of time until ultimately they do, because they are breaking the rules, and they might have been breaking the rules for some time. So regardless of whether the highway code rules say you must or must not do a thing, even if it says you should or should not, take those in mind, because the court will certainly take those in mind if there's a collision, and certainly if there's a fatality. So I hope that's been useful. Please do remember to like the video and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.